Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning Instagram fam, friends and followers of as-Saafiy, and welcome to another episode of Revert Reflections. Yesterday we spoke about digging our heels in as Muslim parents, fighting the good fight, and actively trying to mold our kids into Muslims, even though doing so in this environment is oftentimes an exhausting uphill battle. And by molding our kids, what we mean is actively teaching our kids, encouraging them, and even at times making them do the religious things and fulfill their religious obligations, and holding them accountable for their negligence in their religious duties. Like the Prophet ﷺ, he said, or he was reported to have said in the famous hadith in which he said, "Allimu awladakum as-salat wa hum sibyan allimu sibyanakum as-salat wa hum awlad 7 sinin wa addibuhum alayha wa hum awlad 10 sinin." So he said, teach your children to pray at 7 and discipline them for failing to pray at the age of 10. So then, after speaking about this duty to mold our kids and encouraging us to dig our heels in, we ask the question, why don't we collectively as a community, why don't we do that? Why aren't more parents doing that? We just don't see that active parenting. We don't see that being engaged, parents actively being engaged in molding their kids. I'm not saying they're not people who are doing that, but I'm saying as an overall pervading approach, something that you just see generally in Muslim parents, we're not seeing that, rather we're seeing the opposite. So one reason, brothers and sisters, that we're just not seeing that active parenting in the Muslim community, we're seeing a lot of hands-off parenting in the Muslim community. One reason is a very narrow-minded view of Islam. Many Muslims, and this is something that afflicts a lot of us who convert to Islam, we have a very narrow-minded view of Islam. We just don't see Islam as something which governs or has Islam. We don't see Islam as governing or having say and providing a very specific set of guidelines on things typically viewed by us, especially those of us who converted to Islam and came from religions and faith systems where this was the case, where parenting is viewed as a personal choice, a personal philosophy, a personal approach. Everybody has their approach to it, and it's all relative, or the truth when it comes to parenting and what's right when it comes to parenting is relative, and nobody's wrong and everybody's right, okay, doing it in their own way. So this is one reason a lot of us just have this very narrow-minded view of Islam, where we don't see Islam as something which provides specific guidelines about parenting. We don't see parenting as an act of worship, when in reality it is, and we talked about that the first day of this week, or the first installment, or in the first installment in this discussion. Another reason is just not committing ourselves. We have a tendency as Muslims to just not commit ourselves to the desired level, or we lack the willingness to do the hard things. And as soon as something in Islam presents itself as challenging, then we give up on it and we find some way to justify our negligence. I'm too busy, this is too hard, Allah doesn't place on a burden a soul greater than what it can bear, I need help and I'm not getting the help I need, so I'm just not going to do it. We make lots of excuses and we justify, these kids will be all right, they'll figure it out. We just make excuses for not actively parenting, like we make excuses for many things in Islam that we just don't do, that we should do. But one of the primary factors, there's a lot of other factors that we could mention, but one of the primary factors and one of the primary reasons why we don't actively parent, brothers and sisters, is fear. Fear of failure. Fear of trying and failing. Fear that it won't work out. We'll make all this effort and the kids won't turn out the way that we wanted anyway. And so we choose to be inactive. We choose to be inactive. We choose inaction over action because we're going to put all this effort in and it's not going to play out in our favor anyway. Brothers and sisters, we have to understand that this reaction, or this response to this fear is very illogical, because if we don't act, it's definitely not going to work out the way that we intended. Nobody wants to achieve something and does nothing and achieves that thing. That we have to make the effort in order to achieve our objective. And also from the Islamic point of view, action itself is success. We're not responsible for the outcome. We're not responsible for guiding our kids, but we are responsible for making that effort. We are responsible for making, for putting them in a position to succeed Islamically, spiritually. We are responsible for that part of it. And that's what the Prophet meant when he said, "Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati." All of you are shepherds, and each and every one of you is going to be asked about his flock. We have to create an environment to the best of our ability, which is conducive to them being successful spiritually. Once we've done that, we have succeeded. That attempt itself is success in Islam. But when we don't attempt, we failed twice. We failed our kids, and we've also failed our duty, failed to fulfill our duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we failed twice. If we're really afraid of failure, we need to be active. We need to be working and striving. That's how we succeed. But another fear is the fear of criticism. Because we live in these environments, whether we're talking about the greater community that we live in, the West, and the secular outlook that the West has, the very progressive outlook that the West has, and how hostile they are toward anything religious, how hostile they are towards Muslims, how hostile they are toward anything traditional and conservative. So we're afraid of the criticism from them, but we're also afraid of the criticism from what? From less committed Muslims. Muslims in our community. We're even afraid of the criticism from our parents, our siblings, our friends, maybe even our own kids. We're afraid of being labeled with pejoratives like religious fanatic. You're just overboard, you're overbearing, you just go too far. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to be accused of that. We don't want these slurs hurled in our direction. And so that fear of criticism, that fear of reproach and ridicule makes us what? Just throw our hands up and just what? Just go with the flow. But another fear is a fear of being alone in the endeavor. That our spouses, our institutions, whether we're talking about Islamic schools or the masajid, the mosques, the people who we expect to support us in this endeavor, they won't give us support and will be in the endeavor, will be in the fight all alone. And they won't support us. And so many of us, that fear of not finding support in this endeavor, that it's going to just be too much of a heavy burden to carry on our own and nobody's going to help us, makes us what? Makes us just throw our hands up. But to be honest with you, brothers and sisters, I think the fear that affects most of us, particularly those of us who came to Islam. And I'm not saying it doesn't affect the immigrant or the heritage Muslims, but particularly those of us who came into Islam, and we came into Islam with kids who were not Muslim. They were already, we had kids, for example, at 10 years, they were 10 years old, 15 years, already teenagers, right? But living with us under our roof, under our care and charge, and we converted to Islam. Or those of us who we came into Islam, didn't have a deep understanding of it, and our kids just kind of grew up. And then at some point, the switch turned on and it clicked with us and we wanted to be committed to Islam, but we already had kids who had what? Had been just being raised with no belief system, basically. We weren't actively parenting them, we weren't actively teaching them Islam, and all of a sudden, we're committed and we want to make them committed too. That fear, the fear of our kids, the fear that our kids will, many of us experience this fear, the fear that our kids will hate us, the fear of our kids, the fear that our kids will hate us for trying to make them Muslim. A lot of people are not actively parenting their kids Islamically because they're afraid of their kids, afraid of how their kids are going to react and respond, afraid of losing their kids, losing them emotionally, losing that relationship, losing that connection, because the kids are not interested in Islam. And so because we are so afraid of losing their bodies, losing their physical presence, losing their emotional presence, losing that connection and that relationship, we just kind of stand pat. They don't want to pray, we don't make them pray. They don't want a young daughter, young girl who should be wearing hijab, doesn't want to wear hijab, we don't make them wear hijab. They don't want to eat Islamically. They want to eat a pepperoni pizza. we go ahead and buy them a pepperoni pizza. They want to wear things. They want to watch things. They want to hang out with people that they shouldn't hang out with. And we go ahead and co-sign that because we're afraid of our kids, afraid of losing our kids. Brothers and sisters, if we're doing these things, we've already lost our kids. And although we might have them in body, physically in our homes, they haven't run away. They haven't moved out. We might have them emotionally. We still have those moments where we sit and laugh and joke and watch a film together or go out and spend some time together. And we think, I have my kids. You've lost your kids. You've lost them spiritually. And you're going to lose them when you meet them on the day of judgment and they blame you. They blame you for where they are spiritually and the consequences they're going to face because of where they are spiritually. They're going to blame you for that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in Yawm al-Qiyamah how people who could have guided others and chose not to, chose just to be, mute devils and remain quiet and let those people go astray. Those people who went astray will blame them and ask Allah to punish them because they allowed them to go astray. And our kids are going to be from that qabil. They're going to be from that in that category. We've lost our kids if we're not actively parenting them. And it's going to take, brothers and sisters, for us as Muslims at some point, it's going to take us trusting Allah, trusting Allah's plan, trusting that He is really in control and we're not in control, believing that if we just let go of the wheel, if we just let go of the wheel and stop trying to dictate the future and force God's hand, if we do what Allah tells us to do and trust His plan will lead us to success. What that success is going to look like is not something that we can determine, but we will be successful because He promised it and Allah doesn't break His promise. Our problem is we don't trust Allah. We don't trust Allah. We trust ourselves more than we trust Allah. That somehow, some way, I can be a hands-off parent, let my kids do whatever and hope for the best, and somehow, some way, they're just going to turn out to be good Muslims. I don't have to make them pray. I don't have to tell them that they can't eat that. I don't have to tell them that they can't go outside wearing that. Because why? I don't want to lose my kids. And I think somehow, some way, I can control that by not doing what Allah said. No, brothers and sisters. Allah can control it. Allah can bring about the desired result we want if we trust Him and do what He said. Parent the way He taught us to parent. We have to believe that, we have to trust that, and we have to surround ourselves with people, whether it's our spouses, our institutions, who can help us achieve that. And when we feel weak and we want to give in, we want to cave to our kids because we're afraid of losing our kids, those spouses who are good spouses, those institutions which are good institutions, will support us and encourage us to what? To stay in the fight, to fight the good fight, to dig our heels in. We're on the right path. They'll assure us and not let those doubts overwhelm us and make us do the wrong thing when it comes to parenting. Brothers and sisters, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who listen to the talk and follow the best of it. Hada wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.